dry lips, their hand gripping iron. The sun above the valley of Badr in the second year after Hijrah is not the kind of sun you describe easily. It presses down. It doesn't warm. It burns. The sand beneath their feet has already absorbed the heat of dawn and is giving it back with force. There is no food in their stomachs. There is no water on their tongues. There is the sound of armor shifting, feet adjusting in sand, breath slow, controlled, nervous, and somewhere beyond the valley ridge, 1,000 men are marching toward them. 313 against 1,000, fasting. Who chooses to go to war while fasting? The answer is, they didn't choose this. They left Medina for a caravan, a trading caravan from the Quraysh of Makkah, moving along the coast. Intercept it, recover what was taken from the Muslims when they fled their homes years before. That was the mission. That was the plan. But the caravan escaped, and in its place an army came. And what happened that night in the desert would change Islam forever. If you want Islamic history told the way it deserves to be told, no fillers, no fabrications, just authentic storytelling, subscribe to Tales of the Messengers. This channel exists for moments exactly like this one. Now, let's go back. It is the 17th of Ramadan, 2 AH. The Prophet Muhammad had received word that Abu Sufyan was leading a wealthy Quraysh caravan northward from Syria back to Makkah. This was not a random target. The wealth on those camels had largely belonged to Muslims, confiscated, taken, left behind when they were forced to abandon everything and flee to Medina. The Prophet consulted his companions. They mobilized. But what they mobilized as matters. They were not an army. They carried what they had. Among 313 men, there were only 2 horses, 70 camels, shared between them, rotating. Most were on foot. Many had basic swords. Some had no shields. They were merchants, farmers, craftsmen, men who had only recently learned what it meant to live in a new city, under a new and fragile community. Some of them were young, very young. Some had never stood in a battle line before. Some, when they learned that the caravan had slipped away and that the Quraysh army, fully armed, fully supplied, cavalry included, was now marching to meet them, felt what any honest human being would feel. Fear. The Prophet consulted them again. He did not command without counsel. He asked. He listened. Al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad stood and spoke his loyalty. Then Sa'd ibn Mu'ad, representing the Ansar, stood and said words that became famous. Go where Allah directs you. We are with you. Not blind bravado, grounded commitment. And so they marched toward Badr. 313 men, 2 horses, limited weapons, against 1,000 Qurayshi soldiers, fully equipped, with pride and tribal reputation fueling every step. They were fasting. The desert at night is cold. The same ground that burned through sandals at noon now pulls heat away from the body. Companions wrapped what they had around themselves and sat with their thoughts. The stomach that had been empty all day does not forget by nightfall. Hunger is quiet but persistent. It sits behind the ribs. It dulls the sharpness of the mind. And over that hunger, fear. Not shame, not weakness, just honest fear. These men knew what was coming in the morning. They had seen the dust clouds. They had heard the numbers. They knew some of them would not see the following night. Some of them had family on the other side of that valley. This was the tragedy beneath the battle, that history sometimes moves past too quickly. Quraysh was not a foreign nation. These were cousins, uncles, former neighbors. The severing of those ties had been slow and painful, and tomorrow those severed ties would meet in the sand with swords. But while the companions rested, something else was happening. The Prophet Muhammad was not sleeping. He stood apart beneath the open sky, his hands raised. What he said in that moment has been preserved. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu stood near him and witnessed it. The Prophet prayed, long, urgent, intimate prayer, and among what he said, "O Allah, if this group perishes tonight, you will not be worshipped on earth." He said it again. And again, his hands were raised so long, his cloak slipped from his shoulders. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came quietly, picked it up, placed it back and said softly, "O Prophet of Allah, your Lord will fulfill what he has promised you." Read that again slowly. The man leading 313 fasting, under-equipped, frightened men against 1,000 was standing in the dark, pleading with his Lord, his cloak falling from his shoulders from the length of his supplication. This is not the image of invincibility. This is the image of complete reliance. That is something else entirely. That night, based on authentic narrations, sleep came over the companions, a calm, unexplainable rest in the middle of the valley before battle, a mercy, a steadying of their nerves. They woke to the morning. The sun rose over Badr the way it always does, indifferent to what men have planned beneath it. Heat returned immediately. The companions stood in their lines, armor on fasting bodies, shields held by hands that had not eaten since before dawn, eyes dry from the desert air, throats without water. The Prophet arranged their rows himself, walked among them, straightening lines, looking into their faces. And then he returned to the shelter they had built for him. He prayed again. What was confirmed, and this is from the Qur'an itself, is that Allah's help came. Surah Al-Anfal, verses 9 through 12. When you called upon your Lord for help, and he responded to you, I will reinforce you with 1,000 angels, following one after another. And Allah made it but glad tidings. And so that your hearts might be assured thereby. And victory is not except from Allah. Indeed, Allah is exalted in might and wise when He covered you with drowsiness as security from Him, and sent down upon you rain from the sky to cleanse you, and to make steadfast your hearts and plant firmly thereby your feet. When your Lord inspired to the angels, I am with you, so strengthen those who have believed. The Qur'an does not present this as myth. It presents it as fact. Victory at Badr was not the result of superior numbers. It was not the result of better weapons. The record is clear. They were outnumbered. They were under-equipped. They were fasting in desert heat. By every human calculation, this should not have gone the way it did. But it did. 70 Qurayshi fighters were killed. 70 more were captured. Among the dead, men who had persecuted the Muslim community in Makkah for years. The Muslims lost 14 against 1,000. Before we close, I want to ask you something directly. What does fasting mean when your life is on the line? We live in an era where Ramadan for many of us is inconvenient at most. We miss our morning coffee. We feel sluggish by 3 p.m. We count the hours to iftar. And none of that is condemnation, that's just honesty. But consider what fasting meant on the 17th of Ramadan, 2 AH. It meant choosing to stand in a battle line, in armor, under a desert sun, with nothing in your stomach, because you believed something was worth standing for. It meant that when fear tried to hollow you out, hunger couldn't be the thing that finally broke you. Ramadan was never designed to be a month of comfort. It was designed to strip something away, to create space, to make the soul louder than the body for 30 days. The first great military victory in Islamic history did not happen at a moment of Muslim ease. It happened in weakness, in hunger, in fear, in Ramadan. The companions at Badr were not superhuman. The narrations do not describe them that way. They were afraid. They were tired. They were outnumbered. What made them remarkable was not the absence of fear, it was what they did with it. They stood anyway, and in that standing, something greater than their numbers answered. So when this Ramadan feels heavy, when the fast is long, and the day is hard, and the heart feels more empty than full, do you remember what fasting looked like on the plains of Badr? Not as a guilt trip, not as comparison, as context. As a reminder of what this month has always been capable of holding, the Muslims won at Badr. Against every logical projection, they won. The news reached Medina before the soldiers did. It arrived like something unreal, a story that didn't fit the numbers, that didn't follow the expected outcome of men and swords and arithmetic. But that is precisely the point. Badr was not a story about military strategy. It was a story about what happens when a small group of people, hungry, afraid, outmatched, place their complete trust in something beyond what they can see. The Prophet stood in the dark with his cloak falling from his shoulders, making dua. The companions slept with a strange calm the night before facing death, and in the morning they stood anyway. The hardest fast in Islamic history wasn't about hunger, it was about trust. If this moved you, if any part of this stayed with you, leave a comment below. Tell us which moment hit hardest. Like this video if you believe this history deserves to be heard. And subscribe to Tales of the Messengers, because there are stories from Islamic history that have the power to change how you see everything. And we are just getting started.